Good morning, and welcome to the webinar. Contracts versus Grants is the name of this particular webinar. It is the first in a series of monthly webinars from the Alabama A&M University RISE Foundation. This series was a part of a cooperative agreement with NASA in an effort to give minority-serving institutions a competitive advantage in federal contracting opportunities. Now, we will have a message from the Music Activity Manager, Mr. Clarence Bostic.
Hello, my name is Clarence Bostic. I'm the MURIP Education Specialist and Music Activity Manager at NASA's Langley Research Center. MURIP is the Minority University Research and Education Program and is part of the Office of STEM Engagement for NASA. Music is one of its many projects. But what is music? Music stands for MURIP for Sustainability and Innovation Collaborative. It's a cooperative agreement for teams of minority-serving institutions, also called MSIs, and nonprofit institutions to create and provide workshops and training materials establishing sustainable support for MSIs that desire to develop their institution's capacity through the competition for federal funds. Why is music important? The expectation is that the awardees will train MSIs to develop their institutional capacity, better enabling them to compete for federal funding opportunities. These endeavors then result in successful application to and management of new funding opportunities, including those at NASA. The agreement extends MSI's capabilities by leveraging the MSI's research with NASA research to develop small business innovation research and small business technology transfer projects. Together, these partnerships develop and demonstrate innovative technologies that fulfill NASA's needs and have significant potential for successful commercialization. The music agreement also increases the preparation of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics faculty with opportunities to participate with NASA researchers and agency missions through grants and contracts. So what does music mean to you? By participating, we want you to apply for more NASA contracts, SBIR and STTR projects, as well as other federal funds. MSIs are given additional strategies to manage their federal funding opportunities. So what do you need to do now? Take full advantage of this opportunity. Learn about NASA's resources. Participate in the process. Collaborate with other participants. Prepare your institution's capability statement. And finally, sign up for the NASA Office of Small Business Programs vendor database. Ultimately, the goal of any proposed activity or combination of activities should enable faculty and associated staff of sponsored research programs to learn to compete for and effectively manage contracts primarily, as well as grants or other federal funding sources. Thank you.
Now, let's begin the webinar. So first, I will tell you a little bit about the presenter. The presenter is none other than myself, Ms. LaTanya Jones, and I am CEO of Phenomenal Management Partners. Phenomenal Management Partners is a consulting firm that supports the Alabama A&M University RISE Foundation in creating and delivering a comprehensive training program to assist minority-serving academic institutions in becoming contract-ready vendors for the federal government. Now, the webinar outline. We will talk about the paradigm shift, what is a contract, important differences, types of contracts, get to know the FAR, the contracting process, infrastructure needed, tips to build the infrastructure, getting started, contracting resources, and additional training. Now, let's talk about the paradigm shift. This is a not new, really, conversation. We are talking about how HBCUs should be pursuing more contracts. Historically, Black colleges and universities have been discussing ways to create new revenue streams for years. In 2007, I was at the NSPAA technical workshop where these gentlemen were discussing the value of contracts for HBCUs. In fact, I also delivered a presentation at that event. And the message that I gave is the same message that I want to share with you. It's a no-brainer. HBCUs should begin pursuing more government contracts. Now, what is the paradigm shift? If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. We need to follow the money. Let's take a quick look at where the universities get their money. The traditional source is grants, and you know all about grants, but they are being reduced and they are becoming more competitive. However, money available to the universities through federal contracting is increasing. So the amount of the money that the Department of Defense dedicated towards contract spending rose 7% in 2016. As you can see, some agencies such as NIH have programs to encourage HBCU participation. In FY17, HBCUs had the potential to earn $164 million through NASA contracts. Yet, only $22 million of all of that was received by HBCUs. That left a whopping $140 million on the table, according to the data that was showed in the slide presentation in 2017 and 2018. This data will show that the HBCU Road Tour events, which connect the universities with NASA opportunities. NASA is actively trying to find schools who can help them meet their goals. The first step in getting NASA mission directorates and their prime contractors to do more business with HBCU begins with the schools themselves. You have to understand contracts and the federal contracting process. That's why we are here. Well, what is a contract? Well, the government uses grants, cooperative agreements as a way to fund research for the public good. But it uses contracts as a way of procuring services for the benefit of the government. Grants are much more flexible than contracts. Typically, a federal contract cannot be changed in scope or budget other than a contract modification. And failure to deliver under a federal contract can have potential legal and financial consequences to all parties at the universities. Whereas in the case of a grant, typically a final report is the only thing that's needed. Now let's talk about the important differences between contracts and grants. So contracts, you have a solicitation that is a request for proposal and is usually announced on fedbizops.gov. Whereas grants, you usually submit your contract or your proposal on grants.gov or Inspires or an agency portal. Then on the reverse side, for contracts, you have terms and conditions, and they are governed by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. With grants, the terms and conditions are governed by the grant agreement itself. In contracts, there are frequent reporting requirements, and in grants, there are annual reporting requirements. In contracts, payments are based on invoicing requirements incorporated in the contract. And for grants, payments can be received in lump sum or milestone payments. In contracts, the budget is more restrictive and the scope of work is as well. On grants, the PI, or principal investigator, has more flexibility to modify the contract and less responsibility to produce any results. Now, we will talk about the types of contracts. Now, there are several types of contracts, and we will try to talk a little bit about all. First, we have your fixed price contract. Your fixed price contract is more like a grant. It mirrors the grant. You deliver a service or an item, you have your profit incorporated into your price, and in this type of contract, the university assumes all the risk. And if you overrun your contracted funding, you would have to eat it. So I will warn you that clearly defined requirements in a fixed price contract is extremely important. Cost reimbursement contracts. Cost reimbursement contracts can take many forms. You have a cost reimbursement contract, a cost plus fixed fee contract, a cost plus award fee contract, and a cost plus incentive fee contract. However, in these type contracts, the government assumes the risk because the contract is allowed to bill anything that's allowable per the contract requirement and allocable, which means that the items that can be allocated to a cost element, such as management, materials, etc., it can cost benefit the government. So therefore, these costs will be allowable and allocable. Now you have the infamous IDIQ contract, which is the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity type contract. These contracts are used when the exact times or the exact quantities are not known at the time of award. Therefore, this type of contract is task order driven or delivery order driven, meaning that the IDIQ is an umbrella contract and you get issued many contracts that can be placed under the IDIQ contract. Incentive contracts is what it says. It incentivizes you to be able to do the things that the government would like. They establish reasonable and attainable targets that are clearly communicated to the contractor. They include appropriate incentive arrangements that's designed to motivate you as a contractor that may not otherwise be emphasized and discourage contractor inefficiencies and waste. Then we have a time and material contract. A time and material contract consists of labor rates and hours associated with that labor category. Materials are a part of this type of contract. Time and material is essentially a cost reimbursable contract using rates versus just one cost. Then you have a basic agreement type contract. This is a great example of a basic agreement contract. It's called a other than transactional agreement, an OTA. These agreements are not governed by the FAR, but they are used for research or a prototype. Now, I believe that these type contracts are great for the university world. They are not standard procurement contracts. They are not grants. They are not cooperative agreements. However, we will talk a little bit more about this in a separate workshop on OTAs. Now we will talk about how you get to know the FAR. We will cover the FAR in more detail in webinar 2 on Contracting 101. But for now, here's what you need to know. There are 53 sections of the FAR. Each section contains their own rules. The FAR was written for the government, by the government, but you need to know their rules in order to pay. And now we will talk about the contract process itself. The contract process has many phases. Now, I would not talk about the last phase, which is contract closeout, because there's going to be a separate webinar all by itself. So on this slide, I want to point out the first 2 phases. The first 2 phases are critical and often missed not only by universities, but by private contractors as well. These 2 phases are called request for information and sources sought. The RFI phase is a mechanism that the government uses to look at the market to determine who will be interested in proposing on any upcoming solicitation. There is only a minor difference between an RFI and a sources sought. A RFI is looking more for your capabilities, and the sources sought is looking to determine if they need to set aside this procurement for a particular type, such as an HBCU, AMI, minority-owned, woman-owned, or veteran-owned. It is important, I repeat, it is important for HBCUs to participate in this phase because most agencies do not incorporate an HBCU requirement in the upcoming solicitation. This can all change with you. So what's the infrastructure that's needed to do government contracting? So I've listed a few things here, and these are very important. Number 1, you need a good business development person, a person that goes out and pursues the business. Then you need a contracts manager. The contract manager maintains the integrity of the contract. They understand the rules and regulations, the requirements, and what's needed. Then you definitely need a proposal or technical writer, often called an SME. So this person will write the requirements to the solicitation, and they have to be knowledgeable on what the scope of work is. And they should work closely with the contract manager to understand the requirements of the solicitation. Then you have a pricing schedule. This gives you a standard pricing template for all proposals. This is important for quick turnaround proposals because the prices may be set. Then obviously you need administrative support to help things go efficiently. This person can also be a finance person that ensures that all invoices are submitted in accordance with the requirement. Now, depending on the complexity of the requirement, the finance person will need to be knowledgeable of cost accounting standards for the federal government. Then you have your faculty and staff that are proposed on each effort. Now let's talk about a couple of tips. Now there are more tips, but these are two that actually stood out. So how do you build your HBCUs contracting infrastructure? So what's important is that you leverage your existing relationships. They can come from alumni, they can come from government agencies, they can come from industry, and they can also come from contractors. You also need to collaborate with other MSIs that are experienced in government contracts. This is important because they can tell you what they've done wrong, what they've done right, and how to pursue contracts. Getting started is very simple. You need to obtain a DUNS number. You need to register in the System for Award Management, SAM, and you need to register in the NASA vendor database. Now let's talk a little bit about the NASA vendor database. This is a vendor database that NASA has created so that all MSIs can be able to bid on their particular contract. The reason some schools are not identified with NASA or primes are looking for HBCUs because they're not incorporated into the NASA vendor database. Please go to this website that's listed here and incorporate your school. Upload your capabilities to the NASA vendor database. A few resources for this is the Knowledge Sharing Center. The Knowledge Sharing Center will have a series of webinars to include this one, PDF version of slides, and all of these will be available on the Knowledge Sharing Center portal. The recorded version of the webinar will also be available for on-demand replay as you're listening to right now. Now, what other resources that are needed? Okay, we have a workbook that's designed to provide a government contracting 90-day action plan. This includes a list of next step actions to help you implement all that you've learned. You will also find a list of government contract related acronyms because this can be tedious. This is also available on the Knowledge Sharing Center. Here is a list of recommended reading. NIH has a biomed research contract for HBCUs. Also, NASA reaches out to historically Black colleges and universities, and NASA encourages HBCUs to pursue contract opportunities. Again, available on the Knowledge Sharing Center. So here is what was covered today. The paradigm shift, what is a contract, important differences, types of contracts, get to know the FAR, the contracting process, infrastructure needed, tips to build infrastructure, getting started, and contracting resources. Now I understand that you have been hearing from a fire hose, so I would like to invite you to submit your questions to vp@we-are-pmp.com. Again, submit your questions to vp@we-are-pmp.com. we-pmp.com. The next webinar is scheduled for December 20th, 2018, and it will be entitled Contracting 101. We also have the upcoming workshop on December 3rd, 2018, entitled Acquisition Forecasting. This workshop will be held at Lawson State Community College and starts at 8:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. Participants will learn how to find procurement forecasts for each of the NASA centers and match the center's need with the university's capabilities. Participants will develop individual plans and strategies for identifying contracting opportunities with NASA based on the acquisition forecast. I will also be going over this webinar again. Again, that's December 3rd, 2018, Lawson State Community College in Birmingham, Alabama. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attention. Again, final questions should be submitted to vp@we-rpmp.com. Thank you.